In this video, we are going to be going through AWS Glue and how to create an ETL job and a trigger in AWS Glue. We will also learn the function of the AWS Glue Data Catalog and also how to link it to Amazon and Athena for querying data. So let's dive right in. So the first step would be to log into the AWS console. Great, so the AWS console, I've already been signed in, so the console took me straight to my home page. So the first thing to do is always to select your region or the region closest to you. I'm in Africa, so I'm going to select the region closest to me, and that's Cape Town. I'm in Ghana, but then Ghana is not on the list, so I'll select Cape Town. Great, so the first step we are going to go through is to create a bucket in S3. Right, so we are going to create an S3 bucket, and that would be our repository for storing data. So inside that bucket, we're going to create a folder or folders for storing the data that we intend to use in our ETL process. Great. So here we have a number of buckets I've already created, but then for the purpose of this video, I'm going to create a new bucket, and I'm going to name that bucket online data. Online data bucket. Okay. All right, and we have successfully created a bucket named online data bucket. You can see it right there. So I'm just going to click on that, and we are inside the bucket. So then the next step is to create folders. So I'm going to create a folder that would house the raw data that we will be importing. So let me just create that folder and name it raw data. Click create. I think I'm going to create another folder that would house the data after it has been transformed. So for those of us that are new to ETL, ETL stands for extract, transform, and load. So after I've extracted the raw data, I would transform it, and after transforming it, I would load it into another folder or location. So I want to name that target location folder transformed data. So let's name it transformed data folder. Great. And finally, I mentioned that we may query the data in Athena, so I just want to create a folder that would house the queries that we would create in Athena. So I'll create a third folder and name it Athena Online Scripts. Athena Online Scripts. Great. Okay, so now that we have all three folders created, the next step would be to import the data set into AWS, into the folder and bucket we've created. So I'm going to import the data into the raw data folder. So I'll click on that. And in the folder, I'm going to click on upload on the far right hand corner. So I intend to upload a financial online data set. It's just a dummy data set. I will make the data set available for download after this video, so watch out for that in the description. And so now I'm just going to click on the drag or add files folder here. So I'm just going to click on add file, and I'm going to click on the data set and click on open. Select the CSV. Our data set is a financial data CSV, so I'm just going to click on upload. Great, we have our data set uploaded successfully into our S3 bucket. So you can see upload succeeded, right? So I'm just going to go back to our bucket. So I'm going to click on the online data bucket, go into the raw data folder, and then you see that the file that we just uploaded sits in the S3 bucket. Great. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to jump into AWS Glue. The data into an S3 bucket. We are going to go into AWS Glue and start our ETL process. ETL standing for extract, transform, and load our data. Now, before that, we have to give Glue some permissions in order for Glue to be able to access the data in the S3 bucket as well. So before we go into Glue, we are going to go into IAM. IAM standing for Identity and Access Management. And so I'm going to click on that first. And that's going to take us to a service where we can easily create some roles and give Glue some permissions. So I'm going to click on roles, that's on the left hand side, and I'm going to click on create role. Yes, leave it selected at AWS service. We want to give Glue service access, so yes. And from the options, search for Glue, click on Glue, click next. And from the search, so we have a list of various permissions here that we can give access to Glue, but what we really need right now is for Glue to have access to the S3 bucket. So I'm going to search for S3 full access and select that. I'm also going to search for Glue. Even though we are Glue, I'm still going to search for that and click on the AWS Glue console full access. I think that's what these are the permissions I need for the purpose of this video. Let me just search for Athena just in case and add that, right? And I'm going to click on next. I'm going to name this online data role v1, and that's like a placeholder for these permissions. And so we are going to call on these permissions when we start our ETL process. So I'm going to click on create role and say our role has been created successfully. So when we look at the list of roles, we should see the role we just created as online data role showing there. Great. So now we are going to go back to our home page, and then we're going to go into AWS Glue. So in AWS Glue, when we click on the 4 dashes at the top left hand side, we see a breakdown of the various services in Glue. Glue is largely divided into two main categories. We have the AWS Data Catalog and the data integration and ETL. We will be getting into what the data catalog is at the latter part of this video, but we are going to go straight into the data integration and ETL. It's largely used for pipelining data. So we have loaded data into an S3 bucket. So in Glue, what we are going to do is we are going to extract that data from the S3 bucket, transform that data in terms of maybe dropping some columns, changing some data types, and then we are going to load our transform data back into Glue. You can load it into any other service or even into Redshift or Warehouse, but for the purpose of this video, we will load it back into Glue. So I'm going to click on ETL jobs. And I must mention that we are going to make use of the Visual ETL, which is largely mainly used. However, if you already have a script, if you're a programmer or coder that has already written a script for pipelining data in other languages like Python and such, you can make use of the notebook and scripter editor option. But for the purpose of this video, I'll click on Visual ETL. This allows us to create a pipeline with absolutely no code in the cloud. Great. So we come to the canvas where we actually put in the work. So you realize that there are three main options. We have sources, transform, and target. So we have so many different source options to choose from, but our data sits in Amazon S3. So we are going to select that. And you realize that it pops up on the screen as a rectangular box with a bucket beside it. So once I click on that, data source properties pane appears on the right hand side of the screen and a preview pane at the bottom side of the screen. Before we get into that, we have to name this job that we intend to create. I'm going to name it online job or online transformation job, online transformation job. And I'll just go into job details. And as I mentioned, we need to add the role, an IAM role. So I'm going to click on the online data role v1 we created. Right, we are good to go. I'm going to go back to jobs, and you note that at the top it says job has not been saved. So I'm just going to click on save. For now, we would first select our S3 data source. So the raw data that we imported into S3, we are going to click on browse S3, go into our online data bucket, select the raw data folder, select the CSV, click choose. Maybe select the format of the data as CSV. And we are done with our first step, right? So the next step is to transform this data that we have selected. Let's see if a preview of the data pops up at the bottom. Okay, great. So now we have a preview of the data set that we have uploaded. So it consists of sales data. It consists of a sales data column, cost of goods sold, country, date, and such. If you want to expand and see more of it, you can click on the maximize button at the right hand side. That allows you to see the data that has been uploaded and the series of columns that exist in it, right? But we don't need all these columns, so I'm going to drop some columns as part of the transformation that we are going to be doing. So let me just minimize that. And then in order to do that, we're going to click on the plus sign at the top left corner, and we are going to click on the transform. So in the transforms we have several different options. You can join two data sets together. We can change the data type. We can even make use of AWS Glue Data Brew Studio that allows us to perform transformations. And what we are going to do first is to drop some columns. So I'm going to drop some fields. So I'm going to click on the drop field option. Right. And on the right hand side, you notice that the columns we saw have popped up with the data types beside it all are string. If I wanted to change the data type option, I would select change schema. But I want to drop some columns first, so I'm just going to click on the columns I intend to drop, perhaps discount bound. Okay, so after selecting the columns I need to drop, you realize that an arrow shows a drop down linking the data source to the transformed fields. So the process that we are actually engaging in right now is this stage, the dropping of the fields. So that's what it shows here. Now, I also want to add that for those that know how to query data, making use of SQL, if you are more comfortable making use of SQL for your transformation, you can click on the SQL query option. So I'm going to click on that, and that's going to be our second transformation we'll be doing. So it shows us a third step. So here we already have the query transformation name as SQL query. You can edit that to something you like. Let's say my query transformation. And the alias for this SQL query is my data source. I can change it to online data or anything you can think of. Great, so I changed the name of the SQL alias to online data. So now I'm just going to change the same thing in the SQL query pane that has been provided and run the script. Great, so after running the script, you realize that all the data sets, all the columns are showing. However, if I want to select multiple columns or specific columns, I can change that script to something else. Great. So I'm just going to comment out the first script and then run the second script from online data. Put that at the bottom. So I want to see country, product, sale price, units sold, sales, cost of goods sold, profit, and online data. Great. So in the preview pane, you realize that with my query, I'm seeing exactly those columns only. So let me just maximize that. You see we have country, product, sale price, units sold, sales, cost of goods sold, and profit. Now, bear in mind that if you have columns that the title of the column is not one word but has a space in it, you would have to use the back. You'd have to use this sign, which is a back sign. It's actually the piece on the keyboard that is right beside, to the left hand side of the number 1. So let's say I don't want to show all these columns. I just need country, product, and sales. I'm going to take out the other columns. I'm going to take out units sold. Cost of goods sold. And I'm going to take out profit. And note that each time that I do this, my query runs. So I forgot to take out this comma, so I'm just going to take it out, and we should have just 3 columns showing. So we just have 3 columns: country, product, and sales. Great. So now that we are done transforming our data, and for the purpose of this video, all we did is to drop out some columns. Let me just minimize the preview pane. And you realize that we have created an ETL process where we loaded data from S3, we dropped some fields, we performed some SQL query transformation on it, and finally we are going to load this data into a folder. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to click on add and click on target, and I mentioned that we are going to load it in the folder we created in S3. So I'll click on the Amazon S3 option and then select the folder destination. So I want it to be saved in Parquet format, and I'd just like to add that Parquet is a globally acceptable format that is very, very convenient because it allows you to have it is a form of columnar storage. It stores data in the form of columns that allows you to query data faster. It helps to reduce cost in terms of storage in the cloud, and it allows for the executions of query faster. So this is one reason why storing data in the cloud is faster or more efficient than storing on-premise, because of some of the formats such as Parquet. I'd like to add that it's not just AWS that makes use of Parquet. All cloud services like Azure, GCP also make use of the Parquet format, and even Apache Spark because of its efficiency. Right. So I'm just going to select the target destination as online data bucket, and then I'll select the transform data folder as our destination. Right, and we're good to go. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to save this job. Hopefully it saves. And the next step would be to run this job. So I have successfully started the job. So if you go to job details and go to runs, we should see the job we just running until it's completed. So basically running is repeating the process or executing the process of transforming the data from extracting it from the S3 bucket, performing the data transformation and changes in Glue, and then loading it into the S3 bucket as we have asked AWS Glue to do for us. So that's basically what's happening currently. Okay, so our job has run successfully. So you can see that the run status is succeeded. So what we are going to do is we are going to go to our S3 bucket to confirm if we have a data set stored in Parquet format in our destination folder. So I'm going to click on S3 bucket. I'm going to go into the S3 bucket and go into the transform data folder and confirm. Okay, so we have a data set here in Parquet format, as you can see, that was just uploaded. And so we can say that our job ran successfully. Now we are going to look into AWS triggers and what they do. So I'm going to go back into AWS Glue. Let me just go back to the main console, to my home page. And then I'm going to go to AWS Glue. And now in the options at the left hand side, right after the ETL jobs and notebooks, we have job run monitoring. That's where we were monitoring the job we had just run to see if it was completed or not. We also have the triggers option down here, and that's what we are going to go into. So what a trigger does is basically setting a specific time or period or specific action or condition that is required for your job to run, right? So, and that's what we call a trigger. So I'm going to click on add trigger and name our trigger online job trigger. And there are various trigger types. We can create a trigger that is on demand, that is, you trigger it yourself. You can also schedule a trigger for a specific frequency, either daily, hourly, weekly, monthly. I'm going to just select hourly and set it at the first minutes per hour. Click on next. And it's going to ask you to add a target source. So we are setting a trigger for a job we created. So click on job and select the job name. So our name is online transformation job. And we click on add. Select the job itself and then click on next. And create. Great. So our job has been created successfully. So what it's going to do is it's going to run at 1 minute past the hour. So at every 1 minute past the hour, this job is going to run. We can always also set the job to run after a previous job has ended. So there are several different conditions in which triggers can be used, and I would say that they are very, very essential in automating the ETL process, right? So now we're going to go into the AWS Data Catalog and what it entails. So the AWS Data Catalog is used for storing metadata or a schema of a data set that has been stored in a storage location in AWS. So in this instance, we have stored our data in S3. And so since we already have our raw data stored in the online data bucket, we are going to extract the metadata from our raw data and crawl it, make use of the AWS crawler to extract that and put it in a database in AWS Data Catalog. And finally, we would query the data in Athena. So in fact, instead of using the raw data, let's use the transformed data for this demonstration. So I'm going to go to online data bucket and select the transform data folder. You see that we have our data set there, right? Okay, great. So now Let's go back to AWS Glue. And the first step would be to create a database. So I select the database option, and I already have some database created, but we are going to create a new one. So click on add database. So a database is basically going to be a storage location for the metadata that you extract. So now I'm going to select the IAM role, the one that we created as online data role. We're also using the exact same role because it gives Glue permissions to access S3. Click on next and select the destination for the data we want to extract, and that's going to be the database we created as online database. And we're going to click on next. You can change the frequency of extraction of the metadata as well. I'm going to leave it as at on demand and click on next. And then finally, the last step will be to create crawler. So we have created our crawler successfully, and now we have to run the crawler for it to extract the metadata. So I'll click on run crawler, and our crawler has run successfully. So now we can say that our metadata has been extracted into the database we created. So I'm just going to click on the database. So we are going to try and check if the crawler actually run to give us the data that we want by querying the data in Amazon Athena. So I'm going to go straight to Amazon Athena. And Amazon Athena is a service that allows you to query data just like you would do with SQL. However, it is linked to the AWS Data Catalog. So if you've extracted data into the catalog like we did, we should be able to select the database and make use of that. So I'm going to select online database, and you realize that we have a transform data folder created here. When we click on that, we see the remaining columns that were left after we performed our ETL transformation, and we can write a script to preview that data. So I'm just going to write a select statement. Select all from transform data folder. Click on run. And the 3 columns that were left, we have a preview of those 3 columns shown here, right? So this is one way to verify that the data that we extracted using our AWS Data Catalog actually did work, and this is also evidence that our ETL job also worked. So in this video, we've learned how to import data into S3 bucket, extract that data and transform it in AWS Glue. We've also learned how to create a trigger, and then finally we've learned how to use the AWS Data Catalog, and finally how to query data in Athena. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and watch out for my next video. I intend to create a video on how to make use of the AWS Glue Data Brew Studio for data transformation and data cleaning. So watch out for that. Thanks guys. Peace.